I'm going to do some UFC 266 if I can get my guests in here. Working? Shane is guns. Right. I think I proved it. Shane.
What's up, buddy?
How's it?
Good, doing good.
Using the phone today.
Yeah. Can you use the Instagram on a PC?
No, just on the phone.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
You got your background going.
Man, my fucking office is so pathetic. I can't have that background.
It doesn't have to be fancy. So you
Well,
watched
look
the
at you.
show, I
You
take
look
it?
official. Yeah, I watched it. I watched the whole damn card, I guess.
And what were some of your takeaways?
Well, if I go to the undercard, could Marlon Moraes get some fucking cardio? Like, what the hell is wrong with that kid? I mean, he's an amazing talent. He almost, I really thought, however you say his name, Marab, I
Yeah.
really thought he would win the way he, but not like he did. I thought he would be grinding him out the whole time. But man, he just beat the hell out of him. I thought it'd be kind of boring, to be honest, but it wasn't. It was a great fight. Man, some of these professional fighters, they really need to focus on their cardio, in my opinion. I don't know what the problem is. Maybe they don't do enough intense grappling. I don't know, but I see it a lot, and you shouldn't be seeing that at this level, in my opinion. Maybe on the people that aren't in the top 10 or top 15, they're still kind of learning, moving along. But man, it's just really sad to see one of the top five in the division don't even have enough cardio to go hard one round. That's just pitiful.
Yeah, I mean, Moraes was a champion at one point, too.
Exactly. I mean, but that's what happened. It's like the McGregors. Like, yeah, you can sleep anyone at any time, but the second something doesn't go your way and you have to do a little bit of work, you just petered out and can't make it to the next bell, basically. I mean, Marab was, beat to crap, and then still almost won the round. Came back and almost won the round because Marlon went hard for 45 seconds, a minute, and 15 to try to get the finish, and then he just couldn't recover. I just don't get it. Well, what do you think about that? I mean, what do you?
I thought that fight, I mean, I was going to do a little video on that fight, but I didn't. But I thought that was a pretty significant fight on the card because, yeah, Moraes has been a little bit up and down since he was champion. Derek, you can tap in here if you want. But and then you had Marab, who had won maybe 6 or 7 fights in a row. Looks like he could maybe be a title contender at that weight. And I was going to do a video on that saying, okay, whoever comes out of this, would be kind of, that's why it was significant. Whoever came out, maybe like Moraes could save his career and Merab could extend himself up. Hey, Derek. Shane, are you there?
Yeah, I'm trying to turn this bullshit off.
Derek, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
Yeah.
Can you
So
hear
we're
me?
talking about Merab and Marias. What did you think of that fight?
I thought it was incredible, man. And I heard what you guys were saying. And my thing is this. The Diaz brothers normally are an example. Nick wasn't a great one last night. But there's some guys with just iron chins. I mean, Beltran is an example. And I think that guy, that Russian or Georgian he was fighting, just had an iron chin and was able to come back. I mean, it was an incredible fight. Set the tone for the card, really.
Yeah, I think he has the most takedowns, I think, of anybody on the current roster, Merab.
And I think he also has like the most takedowns in one fight as well.
So, you know, it was the kind of fight where either Marias could kind of save his career a little bit or Merab could kind of vault himself. So I think Merab did that. You know, he came close to losing, but he got through that. And he'll probably be better because of it.
I agree 100% on that. Marlon, I mean, he just showed that the cardio is just lacking a couple different times in a couple different fights. So he's got to reevaluate, maybe find a new physical trainer, I don't know, or just do some more intense grappling. Could be the people that he's grappling with, he's just significantly better than. So he's not getting
switched American Top Team recently, like over the last fights.
Guys, one of the things, I mean, Marlon punched himself out, right? He thought he had that guy gone, and so he just went crazy. And I think at the end, when he was done punching himself out, he had nothing left to offer. So I don't know if that was really grappling cardio or just the fact that he expended himself.
I agree that I just think that grappling cardio helps all of your cardio versus, you know, the punching. That's more or less what I was trying to get at, but you're exactly correct. I mean, but in your training, even when you're doing mitts and stuff, you're supposed to go on those blitzes regularly. Like, you know, so Marlon goes on a blitz and then he's done. I mean, he could not do nothing from that point. Look, then you go to a guy like Ortega later on down the card who was beaten, bruised, tired, and he was still able to, you know, get some grappling off and still able to answer that. So there's just that's the only piece missing from Marias, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got a question, guys. So Marlon came into the UFC from wherever he was, World Series of Fighting or whatever, and he went on a run and he beat some really good guys. He beat the guy that beat I think Uriah Faber, and then he beat some other really good guys. Who was the one that derailed him? I don't even remember. Somebody beat him.
Cejudo came from behind. You know, he had a tough, I would say, round one. And round two, he totally changed up his style. You know, Cejudo's a guy I think that people, I mean, a lot of people do give him credit, but I think overlooking just how good Cejudo is. But he totally changed his approach to the fight in round two. And then ended up taking the fight over and winning, you know.
Got it. Oh, so that's how he earned his next title shot at Mighty House, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of what started him, if you want to say that. I would say what derailed him was, you know, being up and down since then, but, you know, he could have came back and recovered, but he never did.
I mean, he's still a relatively young guy. He can still come back, but he wants to come back, opposite of, you know, let's say, I'm going to say the name again, McGregor. Like, just because you come in and you're on fire and you knock some people out, you know, that's not going to give you true longevity. You got to be able to, you know, excel at all facets of the game. The Bullet, she is one of my favorites because not only does she got great striking, she's got great cardio, she can keep the same pace, and she's showing she's out grappling everybody. And these people go in there because everybody loves the knockout. I mean, I love watching people get knocked out. I have one knockout to my credit, and it's an amazing feeling. We love it, but it's mixed martial arts, and you got to be able to do it all, and you got to be able to do it all for whatever the length of the fight is. And a lot of these fighters just can't do it.
Well, I think not all are in the sport for the same reason. I made a video about that. Someone asked her in the press conference before the fight, what her motivation was to keep dominating. And she just said it was just a byproduct of martial arts, just training. She wasn't thinking about winning. It was just, that's what you do. You're training these skills, and fighting is just a chance to evaluate yourself and see where you're at with what you're doing, and what you might need to work on. And she wins. And I think all the real greats of the UFC kind of had that mentality. George St. Pierre was like that. Frank Shamrock was like that. It was more, we're just learning these things, and then the fight is kind of the test of all the stuff we're learning. And I think she's like that. She's a martial artist, and it's just a result of all the stuff she's doing.
Yeah. And like she said, she's been training the martial arts longer than some of the girls she fights have been alive.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say probably like the stuff that she's done to prepare over her life is probably harder than the fights she's been having lately.
Yeah.
What do you think, Derek?
And when she said that number, I think she said something like 30 years. I said to myself, wow, I've been doing this longer than her, and I still can't hold a candle to her. But, it is what it is. I'm an old man now. But, yes, she is one of the greatest fighters of all time, and it's due to the fact she's been training her whole life. I mean, look, I think a lot of MMA people lack foundation in certain things, and we see that when they cross over into boxing. They think, well, I'm good enough for this, and they are, but they're not maybe good enough in that particular sport. She's got it all. I think she started, as a Muay Thai fighter, right, for a long time, and she transitioned, and, she's incredible. Best fighter, I think, pound for pound at the moment, quite frankly.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say no. It's hard to say she's not, of a male or female, for that matter. It's hard. Now, both of you have some ties to Scrap Pack. Maybe you both could talk about that a little bit before we get into the Diaz fight.
Okay, but you go first.
Shane, maybe not as closely affiliated as you, Derek, but he does have some ties.
Yeah, not near probably as close as Derek. Years ago, I was able to meet Jake Shields. I was able to do some business with him for some partners I had here in town, and led to me shortly running an affiliate school for him. Like, it was almost over as soon as it started, unfortunately, due to the financial arrangement of the people running the gym. But I did get my purple belt from him, and that's about as much as it really goes. He went on to blow up. That was right before he fought St. Pierre. And unfortunately, he and I kind of lost touch over the last, several years. So talk to him on a whatever, Instagram or something. I'll say hi every once in a while.
Yeah, I know Jake real well. I mean, I used to spar with Jake a lot. We still in connection.
Well, I think Derek's connection will come back here in a moment, but
Boost Mobile.
Yeah. I'll have to bring him back. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Diaz fight, Shane, while we wait for get Derek back on here.
Man, Nick looked out of shape, to be honest. He looked a little bit slow. Maybe he had an injury or something in training. That's why he ended up. I was kind of thinking maybe gamesmanship is why at the last minute he asked for the 185. Like, hey, I know Robbie's already started the cut. He maybe had no intentions. So, hey, let's just do this. I don't really know what happened. Now, one thing that they didn't mention when they were calling the fight, Nick's nose got laid over. He got a hook before the uppercut that they talked about. He caught a left or right hook, I can't remember, on the nose, and it was laid over. And you could see him. That's why he kept something on it, because it looked like it was pretty mangled, and I think that's why he ended up quitting. He obviously has some issues with being in front of the cameras and all that, and he's spoken about that at length before. You know, he's part of the reason I went ahead and bought the card. But I always choose to buy one whenever the Bullet fights, just because it's just the way I support her. But, you know, it was a great fight. It looked like Nick was out of shape for the cardio machine that he's known to be. So maybe he had an injury or something. He didn't perform up to his potential. I like to see him come back a lot quicker, you know. Let's see him back in 6 months if he's able. You know, it's hard to come back after a 7-8 year layoff. I mean, I did it successfully, but it wasn't near at that level. I wasn't having to fight Robbie Lawler.
Also, Derek, why don't you go back and talk about your time with Scrap Pack, and then we'll kind of get here.
Well, I had a long time with those guys in San Francisco. I know them all. I was going to talk about Jake because you were talking about Jake. Jake's a good guy. You know, Jake has superhuman strength. If you try to wrestle or grapple Jake, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And, you know, Jake's stand-up, it's very herky-jerky like a beginner, but he hits with the power of a pro, and he's very strong still there, especially when he gets you in the clinch. So, you know, I got nothing but the best things to say about Jake. He has a very taciturn personality, you know, and I think that got him into trouble because other guys around him would come around him without that personality and use him, so to speak. So, you know, I feel bad for Jake in that sense, and I understand it. You know, your listeners aren't going to believe it, but I'm not the most loquacious guy in the gym either. So, you know, I get it. I understand how he could fall in that trap. I mean, Nick and Nate would come by once in a while because I was at Gil's gym, El Nino. And Nick always had that personality. I mean, he was always gruff. And he was short with words generally, depending on his mood. But Nate was like he knew he was going to be a star. So he always had a smile on his face. He was always ready to take pictures with everybody. But what you guys were saying when I came back on, look, Nick was out of shape. I bought the card specifically because of Nick. And thank God for really the Ortega fight. Although, listen, I love seeing Nick come back. It was like a glimpse of a legend. But listen, he was not in shape to fight. And the 185 now, I thought for a moment, I don't know if this is the cynic in me, I said to myself, did he do this on purpose? Did he wait to the last minute? Because clearly the guy was fat. I mean, did he know? And then last week he knew they were going to pull the card because he was the whole card. What are they going to do? And by the way, when I was kickboxing, people used to tell me this. I didn't understand it because I was a high school wrestler. They'd say, don't worry if you don't make weight. There's still going to be a fight. And I didn't really get that because I didn't really understand that we're in a different world now. With the UFC card, Nick Diaz headlining sort of the pay-per-view, of course there's going to be a fight. You know, Nick can change the weight class at the last day if he wants to.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. You know, Shane kind of alluded to that, what he thought might be behind it, or, you know.
Yeah, I thought he was running a little gamesmanship when I first tried to start analyzing what happened. Like maybe he just because he's been a bigger welterweight. You know, we've known this. He did the test cut a while back. He looked great from that. So that was the Nick I really thought I was going to see fighting. And then whenever they panned out and he walks to the cage, I was like, that's a fat Nick Diaz. I mean, I love Nick, but it was a fat Nick, and I was like, man, he must have an injury. And then that he just waited till the last week to say, hey, I want to fight at 185 because what you said, there's still going to be a fight. And also, Robbie already started the cut, so that affected him. You know, he probably started to cut a week before, to be honest. So, you know, props to Robbie. They both landed some shots. It was a good fight. I mean, what you expect? You'd really think, I guess most of us probably felt Nick would take it in the latter rounds. But like I said, he got his nose folded over, and man, I wouldn't want to get hit on the beak either if my shit had been smashed like that.
Even in the first fight, Lawler hit Nick with some hard shots.
Oh, yeah.
Like Derek used to always say, the Diaz, you know, their chins are iron, you know. And,
and they don't use steroids.
That first fight. Did. You know, and but this time it didn't. You know, Robbie was a little more controlled, you know, I think, too.
You know, he's a mature fighter, man. He's probably close to 50 fights now.
Mhm.
He came into fighting way back when, like whenever I was still fighting. So
Well,
that's
let
90.
me ask you this. As I remember it, didn't Spratt beat Lawler, Pete Spratt? And I think he beat him with leg kicks. Like Lawler had no idea that leg kicks existed, basically. Lawler really wasn't a complete fighter. He had all the physical advantages, but he just wasn't a complete MMA fighter until he won the welterweight title, right? Remember that long streak he had in Strikeforce, losing at 205 and whatnot to a lot of big names? And he just kept going along, never doubted himself, and sure enough, he was on top of the world. And last night's just a continuation of that. I'm happy for him.
Pete Spratt, you're bringing up old names now,
Yeah.
man.
I,
Yeah.
yeah,
You're dating.
Rob.
We didn't
Rob
know.
had poor.
Yeah. Were you on the underground, Derek?
No, listen, guys. So I missed MMA as a competitor. I was kickboxing in the late 90s. And then, as you know, Todd, I went away to prison. So all MMA, and by the way, MMA was nothing when I was kickboxing. I mean, it wasn't any bigger than kickboxing was, right? And then it blew up while I was away. And I just couldn't believe it. So great for all combat sports.
So let's talk about the main event because, I know you and me talked about it a little bit, but yeah, I had the feeling of, okay, Ortega, as good as he is at jiu-jitsu, he can't get the fight where he needs it to be unless he gets a knockdown or something. And it just comes back to these things we've been talking about forever. You can be good at jiu-jitsu, but it doesn't really matter. Unless you're a great wrestler, does it really matter that these submission holds? And it doesn't.
You got. I mean, and the craziest damn thing about it all is what the basic premise of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, right? Position before submission. That's what we all learned back so many years ago. Whenever I started back in the mid '90s, position before submission. And most of these jiu-jitsu guys, a lot of them can't control the positions. Now, to be said, I struggled early on with wrestlers. I was fortunate enough that I ended up in a gym, the Lions Den, that had a lot of great wrestlers, so that upped my wrestling level. And I just don't understand why a guy like Ortega doesn't cross-train with some of those, California's got plenty of wrestlers that he could get in there and cross-train and learn to achieve that positional dominance. And that's going back to Robbie, I was saying he has poor fight IQ because he's a great wrestler, but how often does he mix those takedowns in? And, man, the announcers say it all the time. If you can have the threat of the takedown, that's going to open up your hands. Volkanovski had no worries throwing hands with Ortega because he knew he was the only one going to be changing levels. Or if Ortega changed levels, he had no threat. And he proved that as he scrambled out of stuff. He was always going to be the one that ended up on top.
Why take all that damage, in two fights, Max and this one, and not try to change what was happening? I know he ended up getting him in some trouble, but, I don't know. I just don't get it, I guess.
One of the things, guys, I want to put out there, and this was Gil's style. When Gil came along, he was real tenacious on the feet, and he would hit his double, right? He'd push a guy to the cage. He'd get him off the cage with that double again, and then he'd ground and pound him. And that was the entire style of Gilbert Melendez. And at the time, it worked, right? We now know Gil didn't even know how to check leg kicks. But I think what's happened with MMA now is that doubles don't work as readily as they used to. And I remember Tiki kept saying, give me that blast double, give me that blast double. First of all, blast doubles take a lot of energy. And if you don't get them, what happens? You're stuck underneath a guy who is sprawled on you and is about to take position on you. A terrible place to be. So he clearly didn't have the heart for that double. Now, give Ryan some credit. He got a couple body locks. And what you see in MMA now a lot more than the blast doubles or the body lock takedowns, which are classic Greco. And I think that's really cool. And I think Brian did a good job at that. I think if he shot that blast double, Volkanovski would have sprawled on him and he'd have been in a real world of hurt. But, you know, it's easy to second guess a corner, especially when nothing actually happened.
Well, what I feel is, what is Ortega's real strength? Is he a great jiu-jitsu guy, or is he a better striker? I tend to think he's a great jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, he's a jiu-jitsu through and through.
Taking a lot of damage without trying to make that happen, you know, whether it's jumping guard or whatever. Just allow him to continue.
You know, this is where Jake struggled in MMA, was getting his takedowns, even as good as a wrestler he was. You know, the strikes threw up a lot of difference. And I don't consider myself a good wrestler, but in training and during MMA training with good wrestlers, I was able to, you know, get a lot of takedowns and stuff on guys that when we were just doing grappling, I could barely ever take down, like, say, Clay Mars, you know, Todd. He used to just own me, fireman's carries, whatever. But then when we started adding strikes, that changed things up. And these jiu-jitsu guys need to take a lesson out of what they saw out of Dan Hooker. Takedowns are not just about strength and the blast double. They are just about timing, just like striking. But what we see in jiu-jitsu or in MMA these days, this guy's going to go, he's going to throw, so this guy backs up. Then it's this guy's turn, right? And there's a lot of this. You don't see a lot of the counter striking. We saw it from Marlon, of course. He could only do it for 30 seconds. But you don't see a lot of real counter striking. It's one guy goes, the other guy goes. One guy goes, the other guy goes. When this guy goes, that's when you change levels. You know, I go, pop, pop. I'm going to step back. Well, when it's his turn to go, I'm going to dip under and get the takedown. And I did that too. I mean, and this is training. It's not in the fight, but that's how you learn to get those takedowns in MMA. You have to go on the takedown when they're striking. You can't, or you disguise it behind your strikes, which I do pretty well. Those, you know, it's just weird to just still see this. We're 25 years or whatever into the UFC, and these high-level wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys just haven't figured it out that, I just need to time them coming forward with their strikes. Dan Hooker, not a great wrestler. And I don't even think he's probably really a better wrestler than the dude he fought. I can't think of his name right now. I'm sorry. But he had great timing, and the takedowns, they're just there. You don't even have to work for them. So I would like to see more of that. Valentina, she uses her striking and stuff to close the distance and get in there.
So I think what you're saying is absolutely dead on. And there's something interesting I've noted about MMA with a lot of my training partners. Now, I'm not going to mention any names now, but let me say this. I have some training partners that were bad at Muay Thai, bad at boxing, bad at wrestling, and bad at jiu-jitsu. But guess what? In MMA, it all worked for them. And you'd sit there and scratch your head and say, how did that work? Well, it's because when they're all blended together, the timing, what Shane was talking about, is all becomes much different. And, you know, I can't explain that. I can't put my finger on that. I don't think there's a coach who can either, because if they could, they'd be teaching it to their competitors. But, yeah, it's a real interesting facet of MMA. No way to really actually describe it. The sum of the parts are greater than the individual.
100%. I'm a reasonably good grappler, not very good boxer, not a very good wrestler. But at MMA, it seems like I'm a higher level of an MMA fighter than any one of those, right, to my opinion. Right. So I agree with you.
Let's talk a little bit about Volkanovski, because I know me and you, Derek, were talking about this earlier. You know, he's an unappreciated fighter. Maybe some of that has to do with his size. You know, his height and stuff. People like to talk down on shorter fighters, shorter athletes in general. And yeah, what I mean, it was another big win for him, you know. But he still doesn't seem to be appreciated or maybe even respected by other UFC, because he had some other people calling him out on, like Connor made fun of him.
Cejudo called him out.
You know, these people. So it's still like he's not appreciated.
Connor just wants to get another win in his column up by fighting someone smaller than him.
Yeah.
The only people Connor can beat seemingly are guys that are smaller than him. So, you know.
But Cejudo might be an interesting fight. I think that might be a bigger fight that he could get into, you know, Volkanovski. Because you have like the 3-belt.
But Cejudo's retired, so.
But he's saying it's the fight he wants. It's the Volkanovski fight.
And I wish people would stop retiring like that, just to come back.
If the UFC, I wouldn't want to give him the fight, because why would I want to put a belt on you if you're not gonna continue on?
Defend it or whatever, you're gonna win it. Yeah, like no, you're gonna come back and win a couple. I don't know, prove your worth to the company. To be honest,
well,
man, I think Volkanovski. I'm kind of. I wouldn't say I'm a hater. I appreciate his toughness, his style, or anything, but I never have been able to get behind him as a fighter. Like, man, I'm anxious to see him fight. Right? It's more of for me. It's more of a stylistic thing. And no, don't get me wrong. He was landing heavy ground and pound, but it doesn't seem like he's ever truly fighting for the finish. How often do we see him use his wrestling to try to advance position to get a sub? You know, he's content to land his ground and pound back up, and he has the cardio. So I would think, hey, I'm going to push the pace. I'm going to break you. I got to get this finish. When was the last time he got a finish?
It's been a while. Yeah.
So that I think I have a problem with the people that kind of point fight. You know, either die on your shield or fucking win on it, you know, or win behind your sword. Don't just go out there point fighting. I can't appreciate that. But that dude has the cardio, and people need to be asking him what his training regimen is, because if I recall, didn't he used to be a 300-pound rugby player or something as well? 214. Like he was large, and to be that large at that height, wow. So, and you know, obviously it hasn't adversely affected him too much with his training regimen, because that guy went hard. He did start to tire in the last, you know, round a little bit, but man, that's a 25-round war. And he fought out of some subs in that 3rd round, and he still dominated the 4th round. Man, that guy's got cardio for days. I like that. He actually made me more of a fan in the fight with Brian, gutting out of those submissions and stuff. So, but I was literally legit cheering for T-City. Like, I wanted to see him pull it off, but it just wasn't meant to be.
Derek, why don't you talk about Volkanovski? Because I know you have a pretty high opinion of him.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he fights like a fighter on EPO and steroids. And I'm not saying that he is. I'm saying I'm that impressed with his cardio and his strength and the fact that he can just walk through people like that. He did seem to tire. He looked at, I know the announcers were big on it, but he took a step back in the championship rounds, in the 4th round, but that just made him like a normal fighter. I mean, the guy was absolutely incredible. And I will admit, I wasn't a fan before, but partly because I didn't really know much about him. And let me say something else too. I mean, Ortega was every bit as out of it as Marlon Moraes was. It's just that Ortega actually stayed in there, put his legs up, did what he could do to actually keep the fight going. Remember, the doctor was in the corner twice. They were thinking about stopping that fight. I mean, wow, man, that was honestly candidate for if not fight of the year, I mean, that might be fight of the last 4 or 5 years. I'm trying to think of a fight that was better and more heart shown. And, you know, as far as Ortega goes, you know, sometimes you're just born in the wrong era, man. I mean, look, sorry, you can't beat Mount Holloway and you can't beat Volkanovski. I mean, it's
That's
tough. And I
true.
know the UFC desperately wants to make him a champion. Look, he's Latino, he's good looking, he's from LA. They've been pushing him hard, and unfortunately, they're running into a brick wall with the opponents. It's life.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard for him to beat Giga as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have a hard time. He needs to spend a year before he comes back because he's had some hard fights. Take another year off, but spend that year working with the Stanford wrestling team or be like, hey, DC, help me out. Like I'm trying to win this title because that's going to be what he needs to win the title. He's going to have to dictate that he can take the fight down and control the position. So, I mean, he could do it. It's still legitimately he could do it, but will he really get out of his comfort zone and do what he needs to do to achieve it? Because that's really the only place he's lacking. He's got the heart. Oh, my God. He got the cardio. He's been in 2 back-to-back fights. He's got reasonable striking, man. So, if he wants it, that's what I would say he needs to do.
This goes back to something we talked about earlier, and it's kind of all blending together. DC's a prime example, right? DC, basically, most of his fights that I watched, and I loved watching DC, he was kickboxing. And kickboxing was kind of the lower end of where he was because he's actually a grappler, right? But his grappling is so good, he doesn't need to do it sometimes. And it's really weird how that comes together. I mean, you want someone who lacks wrestling. That's the Diaz brothers. I don't know why. I don't know if they hate wrestling, but they just don't seem to put it as part of their mix. I don't know what's going on with Ortega. If Tiki was saying blast double, he must be training it. I'll maintain I think Ortega was right. I think Tiki was wrong for suggesting that. But look, no corner is perfect. I mean, look, that may be the fault. I don't know. It's hard to tell with training.
It's kind of, you bring up the Diaz brothers. They're kind of a good comparison because the Diaz brothers have great jiu-jitsu. But if you were someone new to the sport, you wouldn't know it because they prefer to box. They don't have good wrestling, as you said. So you can't even see that part of their game when they're in the cage a lot of times. And Ortega's the same way. You saw that part of his game when he was coming up through some of the fighters that weren't as good. But once he gets up to the higher level fighters, he doesn't, initiate that game or try to, and you don't get to see it. So if you're someone who's new to seeing him, you would just think he's a stand-up fighter mostly.
Right. Right.
And so I think the Diaz brothers are comparable in that way. I think they have a better chins than Ortega maybe, or no, he takes good damage, but
wow, I don't know.
their own better.
That's their Latino heritage, obviously, because every one of those guys got beards, bro. Yeah. I couldn't take any of half of the shots those dudes have taken, man. Those guys are animals.
Do you think Nick was tired, or do you think he lost kind of the will to fight as the fight went on?
Oh, I think his nose being laid over. Then he took another a small punch on it again right before he hit the ground and took the uppercut. Man, I've never had a broken nose, but I've saw some really bad ones in my time. And, good Lord, if you're getting cracked in something like that, and if there's pieces and stuff in there or just whatever, like Nick's like, fuck it, whatever he's getting paid. And he cashed probably $1.5 million for his night between sponsorships and all that stuff and whatever his weed sales are going to do. Who don't love Nick, man? Who don't love Nick and Nate? I love those guys. Like, I'm going to watch them fight. They're going to lose sometimes. Just back whenever Nick fought George, we talk about the wrestling. He had no wrestling for George, and George wasn't scared of the submission threat. So the wrestling dominated the jiu-jitsu. It's going to be like that most of the time. If the superior wrestler is aware, has submission awareness, he dictates where the fight goes, and you're not going to out jiu-jitsu him.
Right.
One thing I want to say about that. that I think is really important is that was for us our Roberto Duran moment of no mas in MMA. You know, because you're talking about the toughest guy in the world in MMA, you know, as opposed to boxing, and he said no more, no more, just like that. And that was a big moment. And as to your question, Todd, and what we talked about, all of the above, right? It was the cardio, it was the nose, it was why am I doing this? It was I already got my 1,000,005. It was all of it.
Right.
Yeah, what do you think about that? He's going in the fight saying he doesn't understand why it was made and, you know, that it was stupid. I mean, that kind of makes you feel like, well, dang, he's not into this.
Well, I think this kind of goes to, and some people don't talk about a lot, but, you know, mental health. You know, I'm not saying he's depressed, but he has anxiety and that stuff eats him up inside. He probably ain't sleeping at night. Like, why am I fighting Robbie? Well, this don't make sense to me. Even if I'm getting 1,000,005, what's going on? You know, he's obviously has external things that he deals with on a very obvious level. You can just see it in the way he handles himself. So if that shit ain't laid out smooth, that's going to affect his performance. It's going to affect his training and all of that, man. You know, I'm not saying he needs help in a bad way, but he's dealing with a very high level of anxiety, or in my unprofessional opinion, and that's going to affect everything. That's going to affect his willingness to fight, right? Like, to hell with it. But he showed up. He fought his ass off for 3 rounds. I ain't mad at him. Like,
No,
dude.
not at him. Like,
Yeah.
going in, was he really mentally wanting to do that fight, or, you know, to really give his all, you know?
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at it and the interviews, I wouldn't say he was.
And you have to think the UFC is probably thinking, what did we get ourselves into? You know, putting this guy in here. He doesn't even.
Todd, it's always been like that for them.
Yeah.
Remember, he missed the plane to Vegas one time? And, you know, I think he hit right in the head, mental health. Nick is a pot smoker. And by the way, I used to smoke pot when I was probably 20 years old, and it had the same effects on me it seems to have on Nick. You know, complaining about everything, overanalyzing everything. And, you know, Nick just never quit. I quit. I said, whoa, I can't live like this. But those guys, they train like that. You know, the scrap pack guys from Stockton would show up, and we'd be rolling with them. They all smelled like weed. It was the weirdest thing, man. So, yeah.
Well, I do smoke regularly, and, you know, but on the counter side, you got Nate. It's like Nate at first was shy. He didn't like the camera, but it's like now he loves it. He knows he getting paid more. He getting paid more. And I hope to see, now that Nick, you know, subjected himself to going through the fucking circus of fighting for the UFC, maybe if he can get back in there, you know, within a year, it won't be so bad for him, and we'll see him perform at a higher level that he's definitely capable of. Or maybe he says, you know, I'm done with it, and let's watch Nate blow up a little bit more.
So guys, I got to bring this up because Juan Diego Nunez just joined the chat. And I don't know if he's still on, but, you know, I used to train with Juan at Scrap Pack. And this is an example of bringing all our things together, the mental health, the weed, all of it. Juan was a better fighter than Gilbert Melendez on the feet. Juan was a better fighter than Gilbert Melendez on the ground. Juan was better in every aspect of MMA than Gilbert Melendez. Juan's pro record in MMA was 2-2. Gilbert Melendez became a superstar and a household name. And that goes back to a lot of things. It goes back to what do you want to fight? What we're talking about with Nick, your mental placement, where you are. It also goes to questions of whether you can be good or bad at something, but yet it all comes together for you. So, Juan, shout out to you, brother. You're a killer. Love you.
You know, Derek, I think you made an interesting comparison when you kind of, you know, it was kind of comedic, but you kind of compared the Diaz's to Beavis and Butthead, you know? And, you know, I think it was kind of an interesting comparison, not just because of their popularity, because Beavis and Butthead were popular, but maybe the way they go about fighting, you know, their attitudes, you know. Kind of loud.
You know, like, so the greatest scene in the world is the first Lawler Nick fight. And Nick's fighting it like it's a street fight, right? Stockton, bitch, Stockton. And then he slaps him in the face. And you can't tell me that didn't not only have an effect on Robbie, but on the fans. The fans were like, wow, this is cool. This is what I want to see. And, you know, I want to say this, too. I think Dana and a lot of those guys missed those opportunities with fighting, and the Diaz brothers broke down some of those barriers with reality. Another one I saw that could have done the same thing was Big Country. Big Country looks like every average Joe on the couch. He could have become heavyweight champion. Meanwhile, Dana instead got in a feud with him. And by the way, I was right there in San Francisco for 2008 through 2011. You know, the Diaz brothers were fighting primarily for Strikeforce then, at least Nick was. And Dana didn't like them. It becomes this weird vibe between the promoter and how he wants to promote these fighters. And I don't think he ever realized he was sitting on a gold mine with them until a little later. So I hope that's consistent with what you brought up. I think it is.
Talk about that Gilbert Melendez thing, or the promotional thing, Dana White, where they had that meeting.
Okay, so
Sean, I'd like to hear you talk about the backstory behind it before, you know, that led up to that meeting.
Okay, so Sean Enright told me this story. Sean Enright was a Scrap Pack member. Me and Sean split boxing smokers in San Francisco when I first moved there. And he started training with a Scrap Pack. He left the boxing gym where we were both coaching and training. And he told me what happened with Gil and the father. You know, Gil was fighting for who at the time? He was fighting for Strikeforce. And he was world champ. And he was free agent finally, and he got all suited and booted with his father. And his father was his manager. I was actually pretty close to Gil's father, much closer than I was to Gil himself, probably age-wise. And anyway, so they get in an office meeting with Dana White, and they walk in there. Dana freezes them for an hour and a half. Dana shows up an hour and a half late, and he starts screaming. He says, "Oh, you want to be a jiu-jitsu coach your whole life? You want to be a cardio kickboxing coach?" Gil and his father were so shaken by that meeting. They walked out and they signed with Bellator. Bjorn was still in charge of Bellator at the time. And the UFC had to match that offer to keep Gil, because Gil was the top lightweight in the world at the time, right? And then he went on to have that fight with Benson because the UFC did match. But if you notice something about Gil's contract, you know, the UFC normally cuts you, you lose a fight or two. Gil had like a no-cut contract with Bellator that the UFC had to match for like 6 fights. And, you know, it's just Dana supposedly went to Gil after and said, "Hey, you know, Gil, I'm happy you got the deal. It's just business, man." But if you think about that, it is so scummy to try to beat down this world star athlete a couple $100,000 so your company is millions of dollars richer like that. I mean, it's just the worst of the fight business right there. And, you know, I mean, Dana runs things that way. By the way, I saw a post on Instagram from Oscar De La Hoya this morning.
I saw that.
Yeah, he said Dana White, scumbag. Volkanovski deserves millions of dollars, and you paid him peanuts for last night. But yeah, man, it's the fight game. It's ugly no matter whether it's Don King with boxing rules or Dana White.
Right.
Greed, man.
I mean, the promoter's always going to look out for their interests, and that's to pay you as much as you're willing to take. I mean, that's what they're going to pay you. They're going to pay you as much as you're willing to take. So all fighters should discuss that with their managers, and they shouldn't be even involved in that part of the business, in my opinion. They got other things to focus on. They need people they can trust to run those deals for them that have the right connections.
Do you think De La Hoya faked having COVID?
Fuck yes. Yeah. He wasn't in shape either. He wasn't even in shape back in the picture in his Carter belt. See that. Look, hitting on De La Hoya, man. You know, that was a good-looking man back in the day when he was in boxing shape. He did not look good in drag. I was disappointed.
But I mean, he gave this A-plus performance in the hospital.
Yeah. Oh, I missed that. Is there a video of it or something I haven't seen?
He had a video in the hospital saying he had COVID. He looked like he was really sick, or he's acting like he was really
He
sick.
looked like Aljamain Sterling winning the belt.
I say he made it look more believable in my. I don't think Sterling did a good job, but
Yeah, no, he did not sell it.
Out of his rematch, now they're gonna have to do some sort of interim belt.
They 100% should. I was going to actually post that on your web on the Facebook page and say they should just do an interim, because that's what it's about. Oh yeah, neck surgery, now he's injured. Like, set Yon up with whoever, and make it an interim title, and they can run it back. But I honestly didn't. And when I watched that fight, I didn't think Aljo was in the fight at all, like people were trying to make it sound. I never thought he was nowhere in that fight.
Well, it's good talking to you about all this stuff. Derek, you're getting ready to go to bare knuckle tryouts soon, aren't you? Or
so I got to tell you a couple of things. It's pretty funny.
Derek's history. He wasn't able to go before because he was on house arrest, basically.
Okay.
So I gotta qualify this, Todd. I just found this out. So I met my PO, and he's a real tough guy, and he said to me, Derek, I want to let you know something. You're not with us yet. You're on probation for 3 months, and you can't leave the state of Utah. So, of course, I say to him, I said, look, I've been setting up this fight with my old training partner, Joey Beltran, for like 6 months. I said, you can't do this to me. He said, well, I'll think about it. If they have tryouts, you let me know. So I'm going to try, but, I'll tell you something else, Todd, very strange. In Utah, I've tried to find a fight gym. And by the way, there's a lot of them. And I've sort of camped out, even offering these guys money, like Jeremy Horn, and I'm in contact with him, and the guy seems to be ditching me. And then the pit, you already heard about that for Hackelman's school with Nijam out here. They're ditching me too, and I'm starting to wonder, did the Scrap Pack reputation follow me? I'm like, what's going on here? I can't even pay guys to fight with me anymore.
I got a good friend out in Utah. His name's Phil Henderson. Reach out to him. I think he's in Salt Fork.
Any idea how far that is from Salt Lake City?
I actually only think it's within an hour or two. It's not too far.
Well, that might kill the training. I don't know. That's quite a drive.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, he trained somewhere down there, but that's something to look into. I forgot what the name of his. It was a kickboxing place too. So
if he has contacts that he can refer, that would be great, because I've had the hardest time. And it's funny when you got a pocket full of money and still people don't want to train with you. But you know what? That's the fight game. It's a whole day. It's not. People think it's like a normal business, and it's not. Fighters are weird. They don't want to accept you in their circle real quick. And the more credentials you give them, the more you freak them out. So I try to limit that. But then I got the prison stuff too, so it's real difficult.
Yeah. I mean, god dang, I've trained with plenty of people that went to prison, and it's just training. It's just training. I guess I'd think if I was paying Phil Henderson, if you listen to this, reach out to this man and tell him where he can train in Utah. Phil's very well connected. There's those fights down there called Steel Fist, I think.
Yeah, I know those guys. Yeah.
Okay, and he's with that. He's got his whiskey brand. I Wish You Would whiskey. He sponsors some of those things, so. Plug in his whiskey. Y'all buy that if you're in Utah.
Let's connect up through the show, and we can Instagram each other.
Yeah,
for sure.
Once you come off of the lockdown in Utah, they probably should give you a shot, I would think. I mean, bare knuckle lets all kinds of people compete.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they just let another old training partner of mine in that I used to give it to pretty good. But what can I say? Listen, in the fight game, like life, a lot of things matter. Your looks matter. Your story matters, which I thought my story was great, but apparently bare knuckle doesn't think so. It is what it is. It's life. You're battling ego.
How many people are really lining up to fight this bare knuckle fighting? Because back in my day, I was willing to go to fucking Brazil, fight Vale Tudo. Like, I wouldn't even think of fighting like that now. Like, even, I wouldn't even think of it. But back when I was young and learning, and I was like, yeah, I'll fight Pele. I'll get my, like, I'll go take my beating, like, just to do the experience. How many people are really lining up these days? Bare knuckle, they just getting their door kicked down?
Their brilliance, and Feldman is a brilliant promoter, is he has tryouts. So anybody from the whimsical guy to the old pro can show up there and try out. And that's a brilliant promotion. It's a little bit like the Tough Show in the beginning. I think that's the basis of it. And yeah, so they're getting people. I will say this: the people they're picking don't seem to be the best people. But again, that's the promoter, that's the ego stuff.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're having more competitors and more women. It seems like are wanting to do it.
And that's crazy to me too. Like, I mean, those top girls are getting paid pretty well, but I mean, it's for real at that age, and that's their face. Like, you're risking severe scarring. Ugly guys like us don't have to worry about that, but Paige and Rachel, like, they might end up with something that they can't cover with their makeup.
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk for sure. But I mean, for them, it's a way to stay in the fight game.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the risk there in the UFC. Elbows are brutal, so it's one of those things.
Once you're out of the UFC, and if Bellator's not going to take you or something like that, you're kind of out of the game.
What's up?
You're the Third Eye Jiu-Jitsu, yeah?
Oh, hey, yeah, aloha, you guys. Thanks for including me.
Yeah. What's your name? What's your name again?
My name is Dave Copeland.
Oh, it's kind of hard to hear you because of the wind.
Okay, hold on.
I was just bringing people in today, but
that's the only way to explain why I'm on here.
yeah. No, Shane,
You guys
you're
were talking
regular.
about.
No,
Rachel do
Austin
really
Martin.
Love.
He's having the same problem I had.
What Rachel
Yeah,
Boost mode.
he's out in Hawaii.
Bad talker, worked against Van Zant.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
I didn't get
like
nothing.
we were saying, if you can't stay in the UFC, if Bellator doesn't sign you or whatever, I mean, bare knuckles giving these people a chance to still compete to some extent. So I can see
And
how
who's
you do it.
betting?
Huh?
And who's betting? There's a lot of money.
I'm getting about like half a
I
word
think the glam.
there.
I think
Yeah,
the glam of the money.
connection's kind of
The
bad.
money.
Yeah.
My fucking
I mean, they must be
connections.
paying okay because people are seeking them out,
I mean, what's the basic entry level pay now for? I mean, people see it and pay like 2 and 2 to show up at Bellator on the undercard, probably 1 and 1.
Yeah, and you would think that bare knuckles paying comparable or maybe
Yeah, I guess.
better. So I can see why people do it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just old now, and I'd be like, I'd have a lot more to weigh to get me to like be willing to fight again. Bare knuckle, MMA, anything like.
I mean, Derek, why are you wanting to do it?
No, look, 5 years ago, I was back down in San Diego after my time in San Francisco, and I was Beltran's sparring partner. And
Okay.
I'm not going to say I beat Beltran up, but I beat Beltran up. So I'm thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, if he's world champ right now, give me one more shot. Look, I thought that Gambino associate thing would work for the Feldmans. But, sometimes ego gets in there. It's like what we talked about, or I talked about, with Dana and Big Country. And it just gets weird for them. Like, we don't want that in our promotion. I don't know. It seems pretty obvious to me. Look, they're having him fight that at what's his name, Adam Arnold or Arnold Adams in Madison Square Garden in December. I think it would have been cooler to put the Gambino associate guy who used to beat him up in sparring with a book out on it. But look, I'm not the promoter, man. I can't decide the fights. Listen, I'd fight for free. 2 and 2. I mean, I'll do for nothing, guys. You're gonna pay me,
You just ready to put hands on somebody?
Guys, wherever.
I also think when you have some guys like a Juggernaut, for example, Hunt, he could come into this promotion as a guy who's not known from other fights and kind of establish himself in this bare knuckle promotion, and I think he's been able to do that. So I do think having an upstart promotion where somebody, maybe they come in from a different background or whatever, and now they're kind of known for being, a bare knuckle, kind of an elite bare knuckle competitor like he is, so.
Yeah, so Todd, you're on to something that was personal to me. So, I was kickboxing in the late 90s, right? And then I went away to prison for 7 years. And MMA grew really big. Now, when I got out, I was way better than all the scrap packet stand-up. I mean, eons ahead. But my jiu-jitsu was terrible. And I also remembered what the kickboxing promoters had done to me back then. I said, I'm not jumping in there and having them set me up, because that's what happens in the fight game. You get put in unwinnable positions. The fights aren't fixed, but they're fixed by style. So, I didn't want to do that. My jiu-jitsu finally got good enough to do MMA. And then I went back to prison again. So I get out this time, and they got bare knuckle. I said, oh, that's my sport, man. Let's go. I'll do it. My stand-up's been good enough for years, and I'm seeing all these old MMA fighters do it. But yeah, that was my story, and it goes along with what you're saying. There are some guys who will be great at MMA, but they're not going to be good at bare knuckle. And I don't know if David Feldman's figured that out yet, or maybe he enjoys that. It's the Logan Paul effect, right? Let you watch my fighters beat this guy up.
Yeah. Plus, it has some of that uniqueness that the early UFCs had, where you can bring a guy in, like I mentioned, Juggernaut, a guy he's not from the MMA world, he's not from the boxing world, street guy, and he's having success there. So he's established himself in this new venue of competition as a bare knuckle fighter.
Kimbo Slice wishes bare knuckle was around when he was around.
Right, exactly. That probably would have been right up his alley. So
he would have took that stuff.
and especially being in Miami, I doubt they have, they hold a lot of events down there in Florida. They probably have no shortage of people that are trying to, from that kind of background.
That's true.
That see it as an opportunity they probably get into boxing, professionally, because it's harder. You got to have some amateur fights, most likely. But bare knuckle, if you have some ability, you can get in there. And I think that's another reason that appeals to street guys and the tryouts thing.
Jason Nicholson, do you hear us?
Huh?
Jason Nicholson.
Oh, yeah,
have him come out of retirement.
Yeah, for long, I would think, but
he's a little long in the tooth.
Yeah. Although he wants to fight again, so maybe he should go to a tryout,
He should.
But yeah, it was great talking to you guys. I know I kept you on a long time, but yeah, it was great catching up on this event. I thought it had a lot of interesting angles. What are some fights you guys are looking up to coming up?
Oh God, I don't have my PC up to even. I don't even know what's on the horizon, to be honest.
That November card looks good, obviously. With the Usman and Colby.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that one's coming up.
Some of those other fights they're having.
I think Colby gets slept by the third round this time.
And then you have
Usman's still growing. He's still learning striking, and it's kind of like the DC thing that was alluded to earlier. He has no fear of the takedown. He hasn't even been taken down once in a fight yet, has he? In the UFC? He hasn't been taken down in the UFC in all of his fights. So now he's legit learning how to throw hands Like, he has no fear, and he can take you down, man. He's going to be a problem for a while. And, you know, it seems as he's starting to finish people now, getting out of the decision thing. So we may see the greatest, most dominant welterweight champion, you know, coming before us. Because I always felt St. Pierre, to me, was always a point fighter, coming from that karate background, I guess. He always, you know, he would use his style to win. I didn't see him as like a guy that was constantly going for the finish. Usman wants that finish now. He wants to knock your head off. But he doesn't have no problem taking you down and beating you up a little while for it, and he's got the cardio for days. I wasn't a fan at first, but his last couple performances have really drawn me to just watch him and observe what he's growing into, because I think he could have a more dominant and more appealing run than St. Pierre had.
What do you guys think about Gaethje Chandler and Oliveira Poirier?
Okay, those are all some great fights, but I was already talking.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want my opinion, listen, I love watching Gaethje fight. I think I saw it for the first time last night. Highest output of strikes. And, you know, the guy's a wrestler, too. Speaking of the guys who, like, hide their base in their pocket, the guy leg kicks and he bombs. You know, I love watching Gaethje fight. I hope he knocks Chandler out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't wait to watch it. As for the other fight, yeah, I think, you know, Dustin is the uncrowned champ at this point. You know, when Dustin was at featherweight, it was just a class too small, and that's why Conor was able to knock him out. I think Dustin's peaking. I think his fight with Gaethje was a prime example of that. I know he lost to Khabib, but you know what? Who didn't? I think Dustin takes the title against Oliveira.
I agree. I think Dustin is going to take Charles out. I don't know about uncrowned champion, because I like what Dustin said. Oliveira did. He climbed his way up there. He took his losses. And, I mean, he earned it. He was put in a position with his wins to get this interim title. Or actually, it's the undisputed title, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his career earned him that position, and he took advantage of it. He got laid down by Chandler, fought back through the adversity, then finished him. I say Justin knocks out Chandler because Chandler's been knocked out a few times. I think Justin's going to take him out. So then that sets us up for a rematch with the Diamond versus the highlight reel, which that's a great fight to watch. I'll go watch the other one just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But by the way, so I agree with your analysis 100% on the fight. And, like, who knows where it goes, right? Nobody knows until we see it. But the one thing I do want to say is the way they sort of crowned Oliveira, having him fight Chandler, I think was sort of unfair, right? Chandler had one fight in the organization. Suddenly he was fighting for the undisputed title. And remember something else. Like, this is a title that they basically stripped from Tony Ferguson. And, by the way, just from what I know about the fight game, I'm not trying to say anything bad about Khabib, but the way that fight went down with Ferguson, it was frozen like 4 times. That's what happens when you're trying to freeze a guy. When you think maybe I can't beat this guy, but let me take him off his game. And then they stripped Ferguson of the title, and they crowned Khabib with a fight with Al Iaquinta. And by the way, Al Iaquinta went 5 rounds with Khabib. So, you know, the whole lineage of that lightweight title now is really weird. And I don't know that, you know, look, hands off to Olivier. He won the title. But he was also put in that position against a guy who was new to the organization. Anyway, I just thought that was important to bring up.
Well, there's been people come over from other organizations that got the title shot in the first fight. So he won one. He had a win against a top 5 guy, and slept Hooker, who fought a war against Dustin. I mean, Hooker, I was on the Hooker bandwagon after that fight. I thought he was going to do great things, and maybe now with him changing up his style a little bit, he can still come back from the adversity he's faced. But he's an exciting fighter I like to watch. I don't even watch people now thinking, oh, God, they're going to be the next world champion. I just like to watch fighters that bring the fight. Hooker's one of those. But, you know, it happens. Chandler came in, he took out a top 5 lightweight, and they're like, hey, we need to crown a champion. Khabib retired. You guys are in the running. I do agree, though, the rankings are odd and weird for the UFC because Andrade was like, what, she's ranked number 1, but she's lost her last 3 or 4 up till last night. So there's so much weirdness in the championships, the rankings. I mean, it's just like the promotion business. They can do what they want with it to make who they want.
Well, you know, there's something else, Todd. Do you want me to shut up, Todd? I will.
Yeah,
we have
sure.
to go.
No, sure.
So the thing I got to bring up, and the only reason I bring it up, it's not to dash Oliveira because he's awesome, but the thing is Dana does what he wants. Like, I remember when they bought the WEC, Aldo was just given the championship. I remember when they bought Strikeforce, Ronda was given the championship. But then other guys, like, let me give you an example, Eddie Alvarez, they mismatch him. They put him against Donald Cerrone because they know that for Alvarez, this is a terrible matchup. So they cut him down a level, say, yeah, you were Bellator champ, but now you lost. And I don't know if that was personal to the Bellator guys. Maybe it was a Bjorn Dana rivalry because he seemed to always do that to the Bellator guys. Even Askren, he found a way to knock him out, you know, second or third fight in. And there were other Bellator examples of that too. And it's just, I don't like to see, and this is just the sad fact of life, it's like Dana White is God. Let me manipulate and decide who I want to be champion. And by the way, Khabib would have been champ anyway, right? Like, so why do you have to strip Tony and match him with Iaquinta, who probably hadn't fought in 3 years at the time? Anyway, just one of the things I know.
How did Tony get the lightweight title? I don't recall.
He won the interim title in a match with another stud. I don't remember who it was. And he was interim champion. And then something really weird happened where they decided he was stripped and Khabib was going to fight for the actual lineal title. It was like, really?
I'm
Ty,
trying
probably
to
no more.
he fought. Because there was a time when everyone thought he was going to beat Khabib. I'm trying to remember who it was he fought that kind of gave him that momentum. Man.
Oh, he was on a run of like 6 fights against all studs, and he put them all out.
Yeah, he had cut up people with his elbows and whatnot. But, yeah, you know, he kind of reminds me of the Diaz's a little bit. He's a little bit weird, you know, to say the least. They ought to train together, those 3 guys. You know, they're all kind of Ferguson, Diaz, and, you know, they could call it something like Beavis and Butthead or something.
God, you look, the Scrapback already doesn't like me. You're going to make him angrier.
I don't think the Scrap Pack exists anymore, does it?
Not really. I mean, what Gilbert Melendez and his dad, because Gil's got a lot of people around him worrying about the money, they patented that name or copyrighted or whatever the exact word is for it way back then. So Gil uses it for his gym. You know, and I know the same thing happened with Quest. It's kind of the sad reality of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking to you guys, you know, and when there's something worth, we'll do another one.
Awesome.
All right, appreciate you having me on, Todd.
Yeah, it's always good.
Nice to meet you, bro.
Nice meeting you, brother, man.
Later.
Don't forget the hookup in Utah.
Got it.
Please.
Yeah.
I will get it.
All right.
Thank you.